You know, they always say family is supposed to stick together, through thick and thin. But what they don't tell you is that loyalty is a one-way street when you're surrounded by people who only know how to take. That evening at the family gathering was supposed to be civil. It was my niece's birthday, for crying out loud. Balloons, cake, the usual small talk. But of course, it didn't stay that way for long. They never let it. The tension was thick before I even stepped into the damn house. You could feel it humming beneath every fake smile, every passive-aggressive comment about how busy I've been lately or how everyone's just concerned. What they were really concerned about was losing control over me. It all came to a head after dinner. My wife, Melissa, always loved making a show. She couldn't just pull me aside, oh no. She had to do it right there, in front of everyone. Like she was holding court. Like I was some misbehaving child who needed to be shamed into line. You embarrassed my parents last week, she started, her voice sugary sweet but with that blade underneath. You know what you did? I bit my tongue, hard. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But she kept going, twisting the knife. I think an apology is in order. For them. For me. I looked around the room. Her parents. Her brother and his vapid wife. Cousins. Aunts. The entire little kingdom that propped her up, waiting for my submission. I was the outsider. Always had been. The man who never quite belonged in their world of inherited businesses, country clubs, and champagne problems. They tolerated me when I played along. But now? Now I was inconvenient. Her father leaned in from across the table, smug as ever. It's a small thing to ask, son, he said, like the snake he is. Family harmony is worth swallowing a bit of pride. And then Melissa dropped the final hammer. Either apologize or leave. I don't know if she expected me to grovel. Maybe she thought I'd do what I'd done 100 times before. Grit my teeth, smooth it over, keep the peace. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was months of seeing the cracks in our marriage, years of bending so she could shine. Maybe it was the realization that no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough for these people. I stood up. Calm. Cold. Resolved. I'll leave. Silence. The kind that falls when a room full of manipulators realize their target isn't playing anymore. I turned, walked out the door, and didn't look back. Not at Melissa's stunned face. Not at her father's smirk that quickly melted. Nothing. Just the sound of the door closing behind me. 6 months later, their world crumbled. Their precious business, oh yes, the one they all revolved around, came crashing down. Bad investments, poor leadership, internal betrayals. The same people who cheered while I was forced out? They turned on each other like wild dogs when the money dried up. Funny how loyalty works when there's nothing left to gain. And me? I had already started over. Quietly. Methodically. No drama. No announcements. Just steady hands building a new life without them. The days after I walked out were strangely quiet. You'd think there'd be an avalanche of texts, calls, some desperate attempt to reel me back in. But there wasn't. No. I'm sorry. No, let's talk. Not even a half-hearted guilt trip. Just silence. That told me everything I needed to know. They didn't want me back. They expected me to come crawling eventually. Begging. They thought I'd panic once I felt the cold air of being cut off. Financially. Emotionally. Socially. The old games. The same power plays they'd mastered long before I ever came into the picture. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to understand, was that I'd been preparing for this long before that family dinner. Years of watching, listening, connecting dots they thought I was too stupid to see. You see, when you grow up having to earn every scrap, you learn how to plan for storms long before the clouds show up. Melissa always talked about how secure our life was, but it was my work, my sweat, my decisions that kept things afloat. While her family clung to that fragile little empire of theirs, I made sure I had other irons in the fire. Investments. Quiet partnerships. Assets tucked away. Names that didn't link directly back to me. All legal, but out of reach from their grubby hands. I didn't leave with nothing. I left with my dignity and a plan. The first 2 months were rough, I won't lie. You don't spend years building a marriage, no matter how broken, and walk away without a few nights where you stare at the ceiling wondering what went wrong. The betrayal didn't sting as much as the realization of how long it had been rotting underneath. I thought about Melissa a lot during those nights. How she used to look at me in the early years, like I was the man who brought her balance, grounded her. But somewhere along the line, I became less of a partner and more of an accessory. I wasn't shiny enough for her world. I didn't play the games, didn't care about the image. And when her family started whispering in her ear, feeding her their poison, she let them. No resistance. No defense. She let them chip away at us until there was nothing left. They never expected me to choose my pride over them. That was their fatal miscalculation. Meanwhile, their cracks were starting to show. I watched from a distance as the business began slipping. The real estate bubble hit them harder than they anticipated. Overleveraged. Too much flash, not enough substance. The kind of house of cards you build when you think money grows on reputation alone. I heard from mutual contacts that Melissa's father had made some very risky expansion plays. Bought properties overseas at insane valuations. Counted on foreign investors who suddenly vanished. Couldn't secure new loans because credit lines were maxed out. Private lenders came sniffing around, and you know what kind of vultures those guys are. Melissa? She was still trying to keep up appearances. Posting photos from charity galas. Smiling for cameras while the walls caved in behind her. She still wore the diamond necklace I bought her 5 years ago, a necklace I noticed she conveniently stopped mentioning was from me. I guess when your world is crumbling, you cling to whatever illusion still glitters. I wasn't bitter. I was focused. While they scrambled to keep the boat from sinking, I was quietly signing deals. Partnering with people who actually respected my work. Building something real. Something untouchable. Every time I deposited another 6-figure payment into my private accounts, I felt the weight on my shoulders grow lighter. The man they underestimated? He was becoming someone far more dangerous than the man they tried to humiliate. I kept tabs. Not obsessively, surgically. Cold. Calculated. I didn't need to obsess. Their own arrogance was doing most of the work for me. The real problem with people like Melissa's family is they start believing their own stories. They think their last name protects them. That connections are stronger than competence. And when you mix that kind of delusion with money, it's only a matter of time before gravity catches up. 3 months after I walked out, I got my first real confirmation that the ground was shaking beneath them. I was sitting in a small cafe downtown, meeting with a guy named Marcus. Ex-banker. He'd been squeezed out by Melissa's father years ago in some underhanded boardroom coup. One of many enemies they'd made on the climb up. Funny how people like that start crawling out of the woodwork when the tide turns. Marcus leaned in, lowering his voice even though we were alone. They're overextended, my friend. Badly. Phil, that's your former father-in-law, right? He's trying to cover losses with personal assets now. Selling off smaller holdings to keep up appearances. He's burning through favors like matches. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. My hands wrapped around my coffee cup like I was trying to warm them. But inside? Inside I felt that cold burn of satisfaction spread through my chest. And Melissa? I asked. Marcus smiled. Still playing Queen Bee. Still pretending everything's fine. But insiders know better. They're circling. The sharks were smelling blood. Back at my place, my own place now, I started to put some of the final pieces together. I wasn't just watching their fall out of spite. I was preparing. You see, while they were busy gutting their own business, I was sitting on something far more valuable than revenge, knowledge. Contracts. Partnerships they didn't know existed. Legal arrangements I'd quietly secured through shell companies while I was still married to Melissa, all fully legitimate, but completely separate from their toxic empire. They thought I was a fool who just paid the bills and stayed out of the boardroom. What they never noticed was that I learned. I watched. I listened. And while they threw parties and posed for glossy magazine spreads, I was building my escape hatch. By the time their financial house caught fire, I was holding the water hose, and I didn't plan to use it. Around the same time, Melissa finally reached out. 6 months of silence. No texts. No emails. No accidental run-ins at charity events. Then suddenly a message. Casual on the surface. But I could hear the panic behind every carefully chosen word. Hey. I know it's been a while. Hope you're doing okay. I was wondering if you had time to talk sometime soon. I stared at the screen for a good minute before responding. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, but I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was calm. Dangerous. A man who no longer had anything to lose. Of course. Let me know when and where. I wasn't walking into a reconciliation. I was walking into the wreckage they created, and I was finally ready to watch it all collapse from the front row. We met at a high-end hotel lobby downtown. Of course. She couldn't resist the image, marble floors, chandelier lighting, the faint smell of overpriced perfume lingering in the air. Melissa always liked appearances. Even now, drowning, she clung to the illusion of stability. She spotted me first, waved with that tight, nervous smile. The one she used when she was trying to seem in control, but the desperation was bleeding through. I walked over, calm, controlled. I sat across from her, studying her face, same perfect makeup, same designer bag. But behind her eyes, the cracks were finally visible. Stress has a way of leaving fingerprints you can't hide. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Of course," I replied, voice steady. "You wanted to talk." She fidgeted with her bracelet, stalling. "I just wanted to see how you were doing. We haven't really talked since you gave me a choice between apologizing or walking out." Her face flushed slightly. She didn't expect me to cut straight through the politeness. "That wasn't fair," she said quickly. "I see that now." I said nothing, just waited. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tremble in her voice. "Look, things have been complicated. That was one word for it. The business has hit a rough patch," she continued, avoiding my gaze now. "Dad's been dealing with some unforeseen challenges and bad loans, bad partners, poor decisions." She blinked, startled. She didn't expect me to know. Of course she didn't. "They always underestimated me." "Who told you?" she whispered. "I don't need anyone to tell me," I said flatly. "I know how your father runs his empire. I've known for a long time. I just chose not to play his game." Her composure cracked then. Just a flicker. But it was there. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "We all did." Now came the real reason she called. "But we can fix it. I've been thinking, if you'd be willing to help, maybe we can." There it was. The pitch. The rescue plea wrapped in faux humility. She wanted me to save them. I sat back, letting the silence breathe. I wanted her to stew in it, to feel the weight of what she was asking. "You never needed me when you had the family backing you up," I said quietly. "You made that pretty clear." Her eyes glistened. "I was wrong." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "No, you were arrogant. You all were. You thought I was just the dumb outsider. The workhorse. The one who'd always been." She looked away, ashamed. But I wasn't finished. "And now that the empire's burning, suddenly the man you discarded looks useful again." "I still care about you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said coldly. "You care about survival. Not me." We sat in silence after that. She finally saw who she was dealing with now, not the man who used to bend over backwards to make her world easier. Finally, she tried one last card. The weakest one. "What about us? What about everything we built?" I smiled, not cruel, not angry, just done. "You didn't build anything with me. You built with them. And they left you with ashes." I stood up, looked her in the eye one last time. "I've already built my future, Melissa. And you're not part of it." As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight was gone, and the game had only just begun. After that meeting, I didn't hear from Melissa again for weeks. Not directly, anyway. But whispers travel fast in their world, especially when people start panicking. People like Melissa's father were masters of public confidence. Everything was always under control. The problem is, when you're leveraged to your eyeballs and the market shifts, no amount of spin can stop gravity from doing its job. It started small. One of the banks quietly pulled a credit line. A supplier filed a lawsuit over unpaid invoices. A few disgruntled junior partners broke ranks and started talking to the media. Rumors of fraud, of mismanaged funds. Nothing proven, yet. But once doubt enters the bloodstream of a fragile business, it's like poison. And I was watching it all unfold like a man who'd already read the ending. Around this time, my phone rang one afternoon. "Marcus again. They're bleeding bad," he said. "Worse than I expected. Phil's scrambling to sell assets just to cover payroll." "And Melissa?" I asked. Still playing the martyr, Marcus replied with a dry chuckle. "Acting like she's standing by her family, but anyone with half a brain knows she's terrified. Her name's on a few of those loans. She's exposed." I didn't say anything right away. Just let that little fact simmer. Melissa had tied herself to the sinking ship more than I thought. "Here's the kicker," Marcus continued. "There's talk of federal investigators sniffing around now. Some shady deals with their offshore accounts. Phil's old tricks finally caught up with him." "Good," I said simply. "You want to keep watching from the sidelines?" Marcus asked. "Or are you ready to make a move?" That was the moment right there. The fork in the road. I could have stayed on the sidelines forever, let them implode on their own. But you know what? Some betrayals don't deserve mercy. Not because of anger. Not because of spite. Because sometimes people need to feel the consequences they always thought they'd be protected from. I wasn't going to break any laws. I wasn't going to get my hands dirty. No. I was going to help shine the light where they'd always kept things in the dark. That weekend, I met with a man named Reynolds. A forensic accountant. Quiet. Discreet. Ruthless. Marcus had connected us. He reviewed the files I handed him, things I'd collected over the years. Transactions Melissa's family thought were invisible. Shell companies. Property swaps. Quiet payouts to shady consultants. All perfectly legal looking on the surface. Until you know where to look. After 2 hours, Reynolds leaned back, eyes glittering behind his glasses. "Mr. Graham," he said, "this is a beautiful mess. I need the whole map," I told him. Every offshore account, every cooked ledger entry, every questionable deal. I don't want speculation. I want facts. Paper trails. Reynolds nodded slowly. "You'll have it." For the next few weeks, while Melissa's family was desperately trying to stop the bleeding, I was quietly building the blueprint for their full collapse. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. They built their kingdom on lies. I was just holding up a mirror. Reynolds worked fast. Ruthless men always do when you pay them well enough. Every few days, he'd send me files, spreadsheets, bank transfers, property records, little pieces of the puzzle that slowly painted the full picture. Money laundering. Tax evasion. Questionable foreign investments. Deals that crossed enough legal lines to make any prosecutor salivate. The more I read, the more disgusted I became. I always knew Phil, Melissa's father, played dirty. But I didn't realize how much filth was buried beneath the polished floors of their empire. And Melissa? Oh, she was in it up to her perfect little neck. Whether out of ignorance or willful blindness didn't matter anymore. You don't get to plead innocence when you cash the checks. One morning, as I reviewed another folder Reynolds sent, I came across a set of signed guarantees. Melissa had personally co-signed 2 major loans as collateral for expansion properties that were now massively underwater. She was on the hook for millions. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a low breath. That's when I knew exactly how this was going to end. They didn't just want me to save them out of some desperate reunion fantasy. They needed me financially. They wanted access to my assets, my companies, my liquidity, my clean name, my future. I wasn't just a convenient husband anymore. I was their lifeline. But here's the beautiful thing about leverage. Once you have it, you don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to threaten. You just have to let them feel the weight of the trap they built. A few days later, Marcus called again. "Phil's reaching out," he said. "Word is, he wants to rebuild bridges." "Of course he does," I replied, amused. "And Melissa? Still playing the loyal daughter. Publicly. Privately? She's terrified. She knows you have them cornered. She just doesn't know how much you know." Perfect. The very next day, I got the call. Melissa. Her voice was softer this time. Measured. Desperate underneath the polish. "I think we should meet again." "Of course," I said. "Name the place." We met at a private club, one of those places her father always boasted about. The kind where billionaires pretend to be humble over $300 lunches. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nervously stirring her drink. She looked tired this time. Makeup couldn't fully hide it. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I didn't bother with small talk. "Say what you need to say." Melissa's eyes darted nervously around the room, as if her perfect little world was standing right outside the door, waiting to crush her. "We need your help." There it was. No more pretense. No more games. Phil, my father, made mistakes. Bigger than any of us realized. The lenders are circling. The regulators. She lowered her voice. "There are investigations now. It's all falling apart." I stayed silent. Let her sit in it. "We can fix this," she said quickly, leaning in. "You have resources, connections. You can't." I cut her off with a single raised hand. "You're not here because you want my help, Melissa. You're here because you want my money. And because you're out of options." She looked like she wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. The tears started pooling in her eyes. "Please. I'm begging you. Don't let my family go down like this." I leaned in now, my voice low, calm, deadly. "You and your family chose this road. You thought you could control me. You thought I was beneath you, disposable. And now? You're learning what real consequences feel like." Her lip quivered. "I made mistakes." I shook my head. "No, Melissa. You made decisions. And now I'm making mine." I stood up, looked her right in the eye one last time. "You're on your own." 2 weeks after that meeting, it finally happened. The headlines hit like bombs across every major financial site. Preston Holdings under federal investigation for fraud and tax evasion. Multiple senior executives facing indictments. Family empire on the brink of bankruptcy. The family name that had been whispered with reverence at charity galas, exclusive golf courses, and international real estate conferences was now splashed across tabloids and court filings like a crime scene. They couldn't spin this one. Not this time. Phil was arrested first. Fraud. Money laundering. Wire transfers traced through offshore accounts Reynolds had so masterfully exposed. Every shell company, every falsified deal, it was all sitting in neat little folders for the investigators, gift-wrapped with a bow. Melissa's brothers, both of whom used to sneer at me like I was the help, were next. Complicity in false financial statements. Obstruction of justice. Their smug faces suddenly looked a whole lot different in mugshots. And Melissa? She was named as a cooperating witness. A fancy way of saying they flipped her. When the walls closed in, she did exactly what I knew she would try to save herself. She cut a deal with prosecutors to avoid prison time, selling out her own blood in the process. It was poetic, really. The same loyalty they demanded from me? Gone. The moment it cost her something. Marcus called me that night, practically giddy. "You see the news," he said. I saw. "After everything they did to you, you didn't just win. You buried them." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even smiling. I just felt done. Not relieved. Not happy. Just free. "You know what the funniest part is, Marcus?" I finally said. "What's that?" They never even saw it coming. My phone buzzed later that night. Melissa. She was calling from some cheap hotel, no doubt hiding from reporters. I let it ring until voicemail kicked in. Her message was almost pitiful. "Please, please call me. I know you hate me, but I don't know what to do. Everything's gone. I need someone." I deleted it without listening to the rest. That chapter was over, and I wasn't about to reopen the book. By the time the bankruptcy courts finished their work, everything the family had spent generations building was liquidated. The estates, the business holdings, the vacation homes, gone. Their precious family name was now a punchline, a cautionary tale whispered among boardrooms. As for me, I was fine. Better than fine. The new venture I'd built while they self-destructed had quietly grown into something solid. Respectable. Untouchable. I surrounded myself with partners who valued integrity, not empty status. I lived modestly. No mansions. No flashy cars. Just peace. And that's worth more than anything they ever offered. For the first time in years, my mornings were quiet. No more early calls from Melissa with her endless lists. No more family obligations wrapped in fake smiles. No more phone vibrating nonstop with the chaos I used to pretend wasn't eating me alive. Just black coffee. My own place. My own business. My own silence. I wasn't used to it at first. You live in the storm long enough, you start thinking the lightning is normal. The stillness felt foreign. Unnatural. But then one morning I realized I was smiling for no reason. That's when I knew. I hadn't escaped their world. I had outgrown it. The new company, Stonebridge Capital, had started as a side project years ago. Just a small venture fund I'd been feeding quietly, away from Melissa's father's grasp. Tiny at first. Modest. Careful. But now? It was thriving. While Phil and his people were busy playing games with inflated assets and offshore shell corporations, I was investing in boring, unsexy businesses, logistics, infrastructure, water utilities. Real things. Tangible value. The kind of companies that don't collapse when markets sneeze. My partners? All sharp. All hungry. All people who knew where I came from and respected it. No games. No family name required. And the returns? They spoke for themselves. By the 8th month after I walked out, my personal net worth had quietly crossed the number that Phil once bragged about at those long, exhausting family dinners. The difference was, I owned mine outright. No debts. No smoke. No mirrors. One evening, Marcus invited me to a private dinner with a few investors. The kind of people Phil would have killed to sit across from. International banking execs, fund managers, some serious old money types. After the introductions, one of the senior bankers leaned in with a polite smile. "Forgive me, but I have to say, you've managed an extraordinary transition given everything that happened to your former in-laws." I smiled. Not smug. Just steady. "Some people inherit empires," I said calmly. "Others build them." The table nodded. Respectfully. No patronizing. Just recognition. That moment right there, that was my real victory. Later that night, after the dinner, Marcus raised his glass. "You know," he said, "the old you would have tried to save them. You would have thrown them a rope. I nodded, taking a sip of my whiskey. Yeah, that guy's gone. And good riddance, he added. We clinked glasses. I wasn't the man they kicked around anymore. I was the man who walked away and didn't look back. I should have expected it. Honestly, I did. People like Melissa, people who grew up protected by their last name, don't know how to stay gone. Even after they've burned every bridge, they always think there's still one more favor to pull, one more string to tug. And sure enough, one rainy afternoon, she showed up. Not a call, not a text. She appeared at my office. My assistant buzzed me. Mr. Graham, it's your ex-wife. I stared at the phone for a moment. I hadn't heard her voice since the night she left that voicemail. I could have told my assistant to send her away, but no. This was worth seeing, for closure, if nothing else. Send her in, I said. When she walked through the door, it was almost surreal. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but stripped of the arrogance she used to wear like expensive perfume. The designer coat was still there, but the shine had dulled. She was tired. Hello. Hi, she said softly. I motioned for her to sit, but I didn't offer any warmth. What do you want, Melissa? She swallowed. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see. You got that right. Her lip trembled, but she pushed on. I lost everything, she whispered. The house is gone. My father's in prison. My brother's too. My accounts are frozen. I don't even have an attorney anymore. And? I asked coldly. She blinked, like she couldn't believe I wasn't moved, that I wasn't falling into my old role of rescuer. Of course she couldn't believe it. I'd trained her too well during the marriage. I just thought, maybe we could talk, she said. Start over. Somehow, I actually laughed. Quietly. Controlled. Melissa, I said, leaning forward. We passed start over the moment you told me to apologize or leave. Her face fell, but I wasn't finished. You chose your family over me. You chose their money over us. You let them humiliate me while you stood there and smiled. I paused. And now that there's nothing left, you're here. With your hand out. Again. Tears welled in her eyes. I loved you. No, Melissa. You loved what I could give you. That's not the same thing. She sat there in silence. For the first time in years, she had no defense. No cards left to play. You need to leave, I said calmly. And don't come back. But, I stood up. The conversation was over. Goodbye, Melissa. As security escorted her out, I watched her disappear down the hallway. And that was the final nail in the coffin. Her entire world was ashes. And I was already standing on higher ground. After Melissa's little visit, I didn't feel anger. Not even pity. Just clarity. The truth is, people like her always thought I was weak because I valued loyalty, because I stayed quiet, because I didn't posture like her father or flex like her brothers. But what they never understood was simple. I was building while they were burning. The days that followed her visit were some of the busiest I'd ever had, but not because of her. Because of me. Marcus and I had already mapped it out, but now it was time to make it official. I restructured Stonebridge Capital. Everything airtight. Bulletproof. We created blind trusts, staggered ownership structures, offshore safety nets. Completely legal, completely insulated. Every dollar I'd built was now untouchable, locked behind more layers than most Fortune 500 CEOs used to guard their empires. No ex-wife. No civil court. No desperate relative could ever claw into it. At the same time, I made quiet moves in the market. Acquisitions, partnerships, controlling interests in companies that would ensure I never had to answer to anyone again. Energy, logistics, data infrastructure. Industries people don't brag about at cocktail parties, but the ones that run the very world Melissa and her family used to pretend they ruled. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was building a legacy. One not built on a last name or inherited wealth, but on the thing they all lacked, discipline. And for the first time in years, my personal life started to rebuild too. No more staged charity events. No more shallow social circles. The people I allowed around me now? They were real. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while married. Guys who didn't care how much I made or what club I belonged to. Friends who remembered who I was before Melissa and her circus. And yeah, eventually, I even met someone new. Someone who didn't care about my portfolio. Someone who never asked what I could give her, but what we could build together. That was new and unfamiliar, and exactly what I needed. One night, Marcus and I sat on my balcony overlooking the city skyline. You realize, he said, you've built something none of them could even comprehend. I sipped my drink. They wanted an empire handed to them, I said. I bled for mine. That's the difference. He smiled. And they thought you were the weak one. We both laughed. Because now? The weak man they discarded was untouchable. The headlines were no longer limited to business pages or financial journals. Now it was everywhere. News anchors, morning talk shows, social media. Every ugly detail of their empire's collapse was being dissected for public consumption. Preston family empire implodes amid scandal. Luxury auction scheduled to liquidate assets in federal seizure. Melissa Preston named in SEC testimony as co-signer in illicit transactions. Their world, once polished and untouchable, had become tabloid entertainment. Melissa's old friends? Gone. The women who once sipped champagne with her at charity galas suddenly didn't know her name. Sponsors pulled out of every cause she once used for public image. Even her social media, once filled with curated vacations, luxury handbags, and carefully staged perfect marriage photos, went dark. The vultures who used to smile at her parties now pretended she never existed. That's how their world works. Loyalty exists right up until the money dries up. Meanwhile, I watched it all from a distance, calm, detached, unbothered. Every TV segment, every op-ed piece. Confirmation, not of their destruction, but of my escape. Marcus called me one morning, practically laughing. You see this morning's segment? I did. They're auctioning off the lake house next month. The one Phil was so proud of. Poetic, I said. He bragged about that damn place like it was Buckingham Palace. Marcus chuckled. You know, you could buy it. Just for sport. I smiled but shook my head. No, I don't want any piece of that world. I left it behind for a reason. And I meant it. I wasn't interested in souvenirs from a life I fought so hard to escape. A few days later, I bumped into an old acquaintance, someone who used to sit at those long Preston dinner tables with us. He looked uncomfortable. People always do when they realize whose side they used to be on. Hey, listen, I just wanted to say none of us saw what was really going on back then. It's awful what happened. I let him squirm a bit before replying. It's not awful, I said quietly. It's justice. He nodded awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Well, you seem to be doing really well, at least. You landed on your feet. No, I corrected him. I didn't land anywhere. I built this. And that's the part none of them ever understood. They were all standing on top of someone else's mountain, convinced they were kings. I started in the dirt and carved my own peak out of rock. And now? They were falling. While I was standing on ground no one could shake. The court proceedings weren't public, not at first. But make no mistake, word still got out. High-profile family name. Federal charges. Money laundering. Tax fraud. Wire fraud. It was everything Melissa's family thought their army of lawyers would prevent. Turns out, when you bury yourself in lies long enough, even the best lawyers eventually start asking for payment up front. And there wasn't much left to pay them with. I didn't attend most of the hearings. No need. My presence wasn't required, not legally, not emotionally. But I followed every development like a man watching the final scene of a movie he already knew the ending to. Marcus kept me updated almost daily. Phil took the plea, Marcus said one morning over coffee. Good, I replied. How many years? 7. Reduced for cooperation. He flipped on half his former partners. Of course he did. Cowards always fold the moment the cuffs click. Melissa's brothers weren't so lucky. They fought, claimed ignorance, denied everything. The prosecutors shredded them. Multiple counts. Stacked charges. Decades of potential sentences looming over their heads. At the end, both took plea deals when the evidence Reynolds unearthed came out. Ironically, Melissa's own testimony sealed their fate. The same family she once defended with such blind loyalty gone. As for Melissa herself, she managed to avoid prison entirely technically. Her deal allowed her to avoid incarceration in exchange for full cooperation and financial forfeiture. But let's be clear. Her punishment was living in the ashes. Everything confiscated. All accounts seized. Her reputation? Beyond salvage. She was now blacklisted in every industry her father once controlled. No bank would touch her. No investor would return her calls. Her entire existence was reduced to one ugly word. Disgraced. Marcus called me after the final verdicts came in. It's done, he said. All of it. Every last piece. You win. I stood by my window, looking out over the city skyline. My city now. My kingdom. No, Marcus, I said. I didn't win. He hesitated. You didn't. I shook my head, smiling faintly. They lost. That was the real difference. I didn't build my life around destroying them. I built it so I didn't need them. Their fall wasn't my victory. My freedom was. And that freedom? I earned every inch of it. I should have known they'd try one more time. Desperate people always do. When people like Melissa and her family lose everything, they don't simply fade away. No, they crawl, beg, look for backdoors, try to manipulate the only thing left, sympathy. It started with a letter, handwritten, which was laughable, considering how impersonal they'd always been when they held power. Melissa's handwriting was still as polished and precise as ever. But the words beneath it? Desperation bleeding through every curve of every letter. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I have nowhere left to turn. Everything is gone. I've lost my family, my reputation, my future. I've made mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you. Please, if there's anything left of the man I once loved, consider helping me rebuild something, even if it's small. I'm lost. I read it once. Twice. Not out of sentimentality, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't misreading her last attempt at manipulation. Even now, with nothing left, she was still playing the same game. The same bait. I cared about you. We were something once. You're not heartless, are you? I placed the letter back into the envelope and slid it into the drawer of my desk, not to save it. Just to file it. As evidence. Evidence that even stripped to nothing, she still didn't understand. Not really. Because here's the truth she never grasped. She never loved me. She loved access, security, status. And when that security slipped through her fingers, she thought her fallback plan, me, would still be sitting there, waiting. Marcus saw the letter the next day. Unbelievable, he muttered. She's got nothing left to leverage, so she's gambling on guilt. She always thought guilt was my weakness, I said quietly. It used to be, Marcus admitted. Not anymore. We both knew it. A week later, a third party tried reaching me, some attorney she scraped together, clearly working pro bono, probably smelling a shot at publicity. He left a message with my assistant. Ms. Preston is seeking mediation to resolve any remaining financial ties. Ties? There were no ties. The divorce had been fully settled long before their empire collapsed. She had nothing left to even negotiate. This wasn't mediation. This was a lifeline. I instructed my attorney to send a formal response. Mr. Graham has no remaining legal or financial obligations to Ms. Preston. He respectfully declines all requests for contact, mediation, or negotiation. Any further attempts will be considered harassment and handled accordingly. Final. Permanent. Undeniable. The next time Melissa tried to call, her number was blocked. And it would stay that way. The door wasn't just closed. It was sealed shut forever. It's strange how silence feels after years of noise. No phone buzzing with their emergencies. No lawyers circling. No more unexpected letters, desperate calls, or media stories resurfacing their mess. Just clean air. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was simply living. The business was stronger than ever. Stonebridge Capital wasn't just surviving. It was expanding. Partnerships I once dreamed about were now regular conversations. Our latest infrastructure deal landed us international contracts, the kind that keep generating returns long after headlines fade. And I didn't owe my success to anyone. Not to Melissa. Not to Phil. Not to some wealthy bloodline. Just me, brick by brick. And personally, I started to enjoy things again. Simple things. Mornings where I wasn't half listening to Melissa criticize my choices while scrolling through her phone. Evenings where nobody was dropping passive-aggressive comments about how hard I worked, like it was some character flaw. The quiet didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. A few of my old friends, the ones I'd neglected while trying to survive in her world, were back in my life too. We'd meet up at a local bar, nothing fancy. Cold beers, real conversations, no agendas. I remember one night, my friend Mike said it perfectly. You always had a good engine, man. You just had too much junk strapped to your car. Once you ripped all that crap off, you finally started flying. He wasn't wrong. Even my new relationship, and yes, there was someone new, felt different. No games. No mind reading. No high society status contests. Just honesty. Mutual respect. Real partnership. She didn't care what my last name was or what headlines used to say. She didn't ask about Melissa. She saw the man sitting in front of her, not the man I used to have to pretend to be. One night, we sat on my balcony, the same spot where Marcus and I once toasted to survival. She glanced at the skyline and smiled. You ever miss it? She asked gently. Miss what? All of that, she said, gesturing vaguely toward the skyscrapers, the world I left behind. I shook my head. Not even for a second. She smiled, leaned into me, and whispered, "Good. Freedom isn't loud. It's not some grand speech or victory parade. It's that quiet moment when you realize nobody owns a piece of you anymore. And finally, after all the years, all the manipulation, all the games, I was free. Completely. Success is a funny thing. You fight like hell to escape the fire, but once you finally get free, a new kind of challenge waits on the other side. It's no longer about survival. It's about discipline." Stonebridge Capital was growing faster than I anticipated. Word had spread in certain circles, not the flashy high society nonsense Melissa once worshipped, but the serious, quietly powerful circles that actually move markets. Private equity firms, government contracts, international investors. Suddenly, people who used to ignore me were eager to sit across the table. They weren't interested in my name, they were interested in my track record, and I'd earned every inch of it. But with bigger deals came new temptations. The same kind of shortcuts I once watched Phil take. Aggressive leverage plays, creative accounting, connections that offered access, with strings attached. Some of these men, the ones flashing smiles at my boardroom table, reminded me exactly of Melissa's father. "You've built something remarkable," one of them said, swirling his drink after a late-night meeting. "We could triple your growth overnight if you're willing to take some calculated risks." Calculated risks. That phrase, it always sounds so harmless, doesn't it? The old me might have hesitated. The man desperate for acceptance, desperate to finally be seen in their world. But not now. Now I understood what real power was. Saying no. I leaned forward, calm but sharp. I didn't crawl through fire to end up playing with gasoline again. The room fell quiet. "We do things above board at Stonebridge," I continued. "No offshore games. No shadow loans. No favors that need returning." The man forced a polite smile, but the message landed. "We're not that kind of firm," I said finally. And that was that. Marcus called me later that night after hearing about the meeting. "You shut him down?" Without blinking, I replied. "You know Phil would have signed that deal in a heartbeat." "Exactly why I'm still standing," I said. "That's the real challenge after you escape the wrong people. Making damn sure you don't become one of them. Because the truth is, the longer you stand in the fire, the more it wants to live inside you." But I wasn't going back to that world. Not now. Not ever. I hadn't thought about Melissa in months. Not consciously, anyway. Her name didn't live in my head anymore. Her shadow didn't follow me through the day. That part of my life was closed. Locked. Dead. But life has a way of throwing reminders at you, little moments to test whether you've truly moved on. Mine came at a charity gala. Not one of those ridiculous ones Melissa used to drag me to. This one actually mattered. Real causes. Real work. Real people. Stonebridge had quietly become a significant donor to this organization, not for publicity, not for tax shelters, but because I finally could. I stood near the bar, talking with a few partners, when I saw her. Melissa. At first, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because I saw her for who she truly was, not who I used to pretend she was. The carefully sculpted hair was still there. The expensive dress, though not quite at the level of years past. The same forced smile she always wore when she wanted people to believe everything was fine. But there was something new in her eyes. Hollowness. She saw me too. For a moment, she froze. Then she did what people like her always do when their old targets no longer play along. She tried to pretend I didn't exist. But the people around us didn't make that so easy. One of the charity board members leaned in toward her, unaware of the history. "Melissa, have you met Nathan Graham? His firm has been instrumental in saving this year's funding." Her eyes darted to mine, the smallest flash of panic behind them. I extended my hand, calm, professional, unbothered. "Good to see you again, Melissa." She took it reluctantly, her grip weak. "You too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. And that was it. No private conversation. No desperate plea. No bitter words. Just silence. The loudest silence of all. Because standing there, with the roles reversed, her on the outskirts, me at the center, we both knew the truth. I won. Not because I crushed her. Not because I humiliated her. Because I didn't need to. I had built a life that no longer required revenge. My existence was my statement. Later that night, as I stepped into my car, Marcus texted me. "Saw her, huh?" I replied. "Yeah. You good. Better than ever." And I was. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror that night. Not out of vanity. Not out of habit. Just stillness. There's something about looking yourself in the eye after surviving what I did. Because for a long time, that reflection haunted me. I used to see a man who didn't know how deep the betrayal went. A man too trusting. A man so desperate to keep the peace that he handed out pieces of himself to people who never deserved him. I used to think that made me weak. Soft. Naive. But now? Now I see the truth. That version of me wasn't weak. He was just uninformed. And when the curtain was finally pulled back, when Melissa, Phil, and the entire toxic circus showed their true colors, something inside me woke up. Not rage. Not revenge. Discipline. You don't walk out of that kind of betrayal and simply get better. You rebuild piece by piece. Every late night building Stonebridge. Every quiet meeting with people who valued integrity. Every friendship I repaired after years of neglect. Every bit of discipline I poured into myself to ensure I'd never again hand control of my life to anyone else. There's a strange peace that comes when you've truly closed the book on your past. No anger. No bitterness. Just distance. Melissa's world was gone. The Prestons, a name once carried like royalty, reduced to cautionary footnotes in white-collar crime case studies. Their friends? Gone. Their fortune? Liquidated. Their legacy? Poisoned. And me? I didn't just survive. I became. I wiped the steam off the mirror with my palm and stared at the man in front of me. Calm eyes. Steady hands. Clear mind. No more ghosts. This isn't a story of revenge. This is a story of liberation. A man walking away from a burning house he refused to die inside. And on the other side of that fire? Freedom. The kind most people never experience. Because they're too afraid to let go of the people who keep them imprisoned. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention or beg for recognition. It just sits there steady, silent, undeniable. That's what my life became. In the months that followed, Stonebridge Capital only grew stronger. Not exponentially. Not recklessly. But deliberately. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't chasing headlines. I wasn't trying to impress the ghosts of Melissa's world. I was building permanence. We launched new ventures. Expanded into sectors most of my old in-laws couldn't even spell. Clean energy. Data security. Agricultural logistics, real industries that touched real people's lives. No flash. No fluff. Every dollar I made was tied to something solid. But more importantly, I was living again. I traveled. Not because I needed to network, but because I wanted to breathe different air. I visited old friends, the ones who stood by me when Melissa's family tried to pull me under. I even rebuilt my relationship with my family, the ones Melissa always quietly looked down on because they weren't elite enough. Turns out, they were always wealthier than she could understand. They were loyal. And then there was her. The woman who entered my life after the storm cleared. No pretenses. No expectations. No hidden agendas. She didn't care about my bank accounts or my business profile. She cared about me. The man who'd fought, bled, lost, and stood back up. One evening, we sat on the deck of a cabin I'd built with my own hands. No hired contractors, no grand architects, just me, some old friends, and the kind of sweat that reminds you you're alive. The stars above us, the fire crackling nearby. You ever think about it? She asked. About what? Everything you went through. Them. I stared at the flames for a moment. Sometimes, I admitted, but not the way you think. She waited, letting me finish the thought. I don't hate them, I said. I don't even feel anger anymore. What I feel is simple. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? Gratitude. Her eyes narrowed with surprise. Because they taught me, I continued. They showed me exactly who not to become. They forced me to build something that can't be taken, because it was never given. She smiled softly. That's why she loved me, because I no longer carried the poison they tried to inject. I wasn't bitter. I was free.